This is WFYI News Now. It's September 16th, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. On today's show, we have two stories about housing in Indianapolis. A new affordable housing organization hosted its first member meeting to fight rising rent and housing prices in the city. And Indianapolis itself will pay rent on some 30 units later this year to get individuals and families off the street and into an apartment.
It's very difficult for people with barriers to housing to get housed, even if they have a voucher. And so the idea of this is to lower the barriers by having a master lease.
Those stories coming up. But first, the next installment of our regular segment called The Checkup from Side Effects Public Media, where the health reporting team explores a single question sparked by a recent news story or maybe by one of our listeners.
Sometimes patients go to the doctor's office expecting their bill to be a certain price, but then it ends up being a lot more expensive than they originally thought. So why does this happen, and how can you help reduce the price? That's the Checkup's question for today. I'm Lizzie McGreevy, Community Engagement Specialist at Side Effects Public Media, and with me today is health reporter Elizabeth Gabriel.
Hey, Lizzie.
Hi, Elizabeth. So I heard down at the water cooler that you went to the doctor recently for an annual checkup just to make sure everything's running okay and functioning. What happened?
Yeah, so I called my insurance to make sure I was going to an in-network provider. I made a list of questions ahead of time so I could get everything answered in one go. But what was supposed to be a free annual physical ended up costing me $80, which definitely isn't bad. I've heard of a lot of scary medical billing stories. But unexpected charges like that are tough when you're already struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, I had something similar to that happen to me once too, and I feel like people don't talk about it enough. So why do routine checkups end up costing us so much more money?
So let's back it up a little bit. When someone goes to the doctor, they ask you questions and potentially do some lab work. Most preventative services, like annual physicals and vaccines, are covered under the Affordable Care Act. But if a doctor performs treatments that require them to go beyond their level of effort that they believe complies with the definition of preventative care, a doctor can write down an additional billing code. That triggers an out-of-pocket payment for the patient depending on the exams that are provided. Some of the guidance on medical billing isn't clear, and there's a lot of discretion given to doctors. And there isn't really an accountability system within hospitals to make sure the right code was written. So it can be difficult to change the code or remove these charges.
Yeah, that all makes sense, but why is it just so hard to fix it?
It's really tricky. Since the person in the billing office or your insurance wasn't at the appointment with you, the billing office typically uses the original code that was provided. The billing office may contact your doctor at some point, but it's a toss-up as to whether or not they'll actually do this. Many hospitals send patients summary bills of their appointments, but not detailed bills. You can request a detailed bill, also known as an itemized bill, but that could take some time depending on the facility, so there are a lot of barriers. Listen to what Linda Blumberg told me. She's a health policy expert at Georgetown University.
It is in their interest to make this stuff very difficult to understand. Transparency is not going to benefit them.
Okay. So what should someone do if they want to contest a medical bill, and what's the likelihood that that will even work in their favor?
Girl, that is a good question. Unfortunately, it's not very straightforward. To start off, try calling your doctor's office and see how the charges work and see what they can do. If that doesn't work, patients can call their insurance company and explain the problem. Then you can ask them to appeal the charge. But it took me calling the insurance company 3 to 4 times before a representative said this was even an option. Now I have to wait another 30 days to see if my insurance will approve or deny the request.
Okay, so other than having all of the patience and persistence in the world, a big takeaway from this conversation is that billing errors happen even more than we expect, which, fantastic. Is there even a long-term or a systemic solution to this problem?
Real quick, I just want to reemphasize that this is really frustrating because unless you know how to work the system, you might end up paying more than you should. And even if you do know what to do, finding the energy to haggle with doctors' offices and insurance companies is really draining on top of everyday life. So, to actually answer your question, Bloomberg said making the bills easier to decipher would be a huge step forward. That means requiring providers to send out detailed bills to patients, or at least automatically ask them when they're discharged if they want a detailed bill. Internal and external reviews of hospitals could help, and Bloomberg says it could also be possible to use AI to check and see if billing codes match up with the description of the office visit. But that's just an idea for now.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you for this great information, and thank you for letting us know that these billing errors aren't just happening to us, and it's happening to others as well. If you have questions about our healthcare system, questions you're too shy to ask your doctor, or other health-related questions, please reach out to us. We'll be back with more health information at your next checkup. Stay safe.
That was The Checkup by Side Effects Public Media. Side Effects is a regional health reporting collaboration of NPR member stations across the Midwest, based here at WFYI. A new affordable housing organization hosted its first member meeting last week to help combat the rising rent and housing prices in Indianapolis. The Indianapolis Community Land Trust, or IndyCLT, launched in July after 2 years of preparation. A CLT is an organization that keeps local housing affordable for generations through agreements with landowners. The IndyCLT's first meeting focused on building community connections, answering member questions, and educating people on the importance of community land trusts. Khalil M.Y. Africa is with Kepra Institute, which helped launch the IndyCLT.
This process is people first, outcome second. And so I think it's very important for Indianapolis to be involved in this kind of initiative to help quell some of the angst from the trauma of the past.
Another crucial topic of discussion during the meeting was finances. The organization received around $400,000 of funding from the city for its launch, but that money will run out at the end of this year. The group plans to do funding research and apply for more grants. The IndyCLT will have its next meeting on October 9th. It is open to the public. And for our final story today, the city of Indianapolis will pay rent on some 30 units later this year to get individuals and families off the street and into an apartment. WFYI's Ben Thorpe reports the pilot program is aimed at quickly getting some of the city's unhoused under a roof.
The pilot program uses something called master leasing. The city would work directly with landlords to pay rent and cover any damages incurred by otherwise unhoused residents. That allows homeless people to get into a unit without having to wait for months or years to get a housing voucher and find a landlord willing to take it. Rodney Stockman is the policy director of homelessness for Indianapolis. He says the city will put roughly $500,000 into the pilot over the next year.
It's very difficult for people with barriers to housing to get housed, even if they have a voucher. And so the idea of this is to lower the barriers by having a master lease.
Indianapolis isn't the first city to use master leasing as a way to help the city's unhoused. Cities like Milwaukee have used master leasing as part of a strategy to reduce unsheltered homelessness. I'm Ben Thorpe.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.